Act 1. The Incident. It was a crime scene so brutal, a seasoned investigator would later describe it as the worst I've ever seen. Blood was everywhere. The walls, the floor, even the ceiling bore the marks of sheer horror. A woman, shot, beaten, dragged back into her own home. And in the bathroom, a bathtub filled with water. And inside it, the small bodies of her 3 children. They had been drowned. 2 of them were just 6 years old. 1 was 3. They were still in their pajamas. Their homework lay unfinished on the table. On the night of November 20th, 2010, police were dispatched to a quiet home in Tallahassee, Florida, for a welfare check. What they found was not a home, it was a slaughterhouse. Brandy Peters, 27, and her 3 children, twin girls Tamaya and Tanaya, and her son Javante, had all been killed in the most violent, intimate way imaginable. There were no signs of forced entry. The house was locked from the inside. Whoever had done this had been invited in, or worse, had already belonged there. Act 2. Timeline of discovery. The timeline leading to the discovery of the crime was disturbingly short but tragically telling. Brandy was a home-based hairstylist who lived in a modest, loving home on Saddle Creek Run Road. She was the kind of woman who always answered her phone, especially with Thanksgiving around the corner. But on that day, her cousin Janet couldn't get through to her, nor could Brandy's mother. By evening, the worry had bloomed into fear. A neighbor had noticed something off. The front yard was too still. The house was quiet. The children hadn't been seen playing. A call to 911 set everything into motion. When police finally breached the house, they were met with the stench of death. Brandy lay near the doorway, her body riddled with bullets and blunt force trauma. Her children were stacked in the tub, like they were objects, not human beings. Some had been shot, some drowned. It was as if the killer wanted to erase an entire bloodline. Act 3. The victims and their life. Brandy Peters was born on Valentine's Day, 1983, the youngest of 8 siblings. A bright, independent soul, she found her calling early on through hairstyling, a gift she inherited from her mother. After graduating from Godby High School, Brandy turned that gift into a business. She worked from home, creating intricate hairstyles that helped her provide for her 3 children. Brandy's first serious relationship was with a man named Antonio Anthony. Together they had the twin girls, Tamaya and Tanaya. But when Antonio went to prison, Brandy found herself alone. Later, she met Henry Segura, a welder who became the father of her youngest, Javante. Their relationship was brief, some would even call it an affair. But Javante was born in 2007, and Brandy began to build a new chapter in her life. Her home became her haven, her children, her reason for everything. Tamaya and Tanaya were intelligent and kind-hearted, known for giggling at silly jokes and scribbling their dreams in coloring books. Javante was only 3. His favorite toy was a fire truck. His favorite word was mommy. The Peters household wasn't rich, but it was rich in love. And then, all of it, gone. Act 4. Crime scene breakdown. The home on Saddle Creek Run was more than just a scene of violence. It was a message. Investigators described the blood patterns as wild and unrestrained. Trails of blood led from room to room, smearing against walls, pooling beneath Brandy's lifeless body at the entrance. There were signs she had fought to the bitter end, fought to escape, fought to protect her children. But she didn't make it. She had been shot multiple times, then beaten, then dragged. In the bathroom, the horror escalated. The killer had placed the children's bodies in the tub, one on top of the other. The tub was filled with water, but not all of them had drowned. Some had been shot first. There was no logic to it, no reason, only cruelty. One child was shot, then placed in the water. Another drowned. The youngest, Javante, had water in his lungs. He was alive when submerged. There was no sign of forced entry. The door was locked. The phone cord had been ripped from the wall. No valuables were taken. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. Whoever had done this knew the layout of the house, knew the routine, knew where to strike. Act 5. Suspicion and lies. Suspicion quickly narrowed, and one name kept rising to the surface: Henry Segura. Henry, the father of Brandy's youngest child, had a complicated history with her. Though they were never officially together, Brandy had filed for child support. Henry owed her $20,000, a debt he was desperate to escape. When first interviewed by detectives, Henry appeared calm, cooperative, even helpful. He denied any conflict with Brandy and offered his DNA. He claimed he was home at the time of the murders. His wife backed him up. But investigators noticed scratches on his hand, red marks on his skin. He said it was from a gang fight. Then he said he had been shot. Then another story, and another. Eventually, Henry admitted he had visited Brandy, just 2 days before her murder. Then came a bigger twist. Detectives found out Henry had a second phone, one he didn't disclose. And that phone, it pinged near Brandy's home at the exact time of the murders. He had lied. Act 6, the turning point. That hidden phone changed everything. Now Henry couldn't deny he had been at Brandy's home the day she died. His story shifted. He said he had gone over for sex, not murder. He hadn't told police earlier because he didn't want his wife to find out. But that lie, a jailhouse informant named Kelsey Kennard came forward. He claimed that while sharing a cell with Henry, the man had confessed. In haunting detail, Henry allegedly described how he killed Brandy and the children. Not just to get out of paying child support, but because in his words, if the mother dies and the child dies, I owe nothing. That was the moment everything clicked. The brutality, the lack of theft, the target. Prosecutors believe Brandy and Javante were the intended victims. The twin girls, they weren't supposed to be home that night. In Henry's twisted plan, they were just collateral damage, and it almost worked. But now, justice was catching up. Act 7, Psychology and Motive. Henry Segura wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He was worse, he was ordinary, a father, a husband, a man who lived in plain sight, and that's what made the crime so chilling. When prosecutors dug into his past, a pattern began to emerge. Henry had multiple children with multiple women, all while legally married. He had lied, manipulated, avoided responsibility again and again. Brandy Peters had finally held him accountable. She pursued $20,000 in unpaid child support, a court-ordered burden Henry could no longer ignore. The motive wasn't passion, it wasn't jealousy, it was math. Cold, calculated, deadly. If Brandy lived, he'd pay. If Javante lived, he'd pay. If neither were around, he'd owe nothing. That twisted logic became the backbone of the case against him. But what stunned even seasoned investigators was the complete lack of empathy. To kill a woman was horrific, but to kill your own son and 2 little girls who weren't even supposed to be there? You'd have to be soulless, or worse, rationally cruel. During court proceedings, Henry tried to cry. He whispered to his attorney, he nodded to family, but the jury saw through it. His interviews were full of shifting stories, his face unreadable. In his own words, those recorded phone pings, that hidden second phone, told the real story. Henry wasn't a grieving father. He was a man who thought he could erase a problem by erasing 4 lives. Act 8, Aftermath and Emotional Echo. It took 9 years. 9 years of false leads, drug cartel fantasies, jailhouse lies, mental health evaluations, and families left shattered. But in November 2019, Henry Segura was finally convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. The verdict brought some closure, but not peace. Brandy's mother, who had raised 8 children, had to bury her youngest daughter and 3 grandchildren. Her sister Monica wept through the trial. Her cousin Janet, who was waiting for Brandy's visit that Thanksgiving weekend, never fully recovered.
What remained wasn't just grief,
It was horror. Because this wasn't a break-in gone wrong, it wasn't a robbery or revenge. It was someone Brandy had once trusted, someone she shared a child with, someone who sat with her children at birthday parties and later left them stacked like trash in a bathtub. The court called it murder, but the community called it something else, evil. To this day, people still ask, was it really about money? Or was there something even darker we never uncovered? We may never know, but one thing is certain, Brandy Peters fought like hell to protect her babies. And in her final moments, she showed more courage than her killer ever could. This wasn't just a crime, it was a message. a warning about the monsters who smile, lie, and walk among us.